At 03:23 in the morning, the Sergei Kotov was sitting exactly where Russia needed it to be. Berth head inside Novorossiysk harbor, engines cold, deck crew rotated off, point defense systems cycling through their overnight standby protocols. One of the most operationally active patrol vessels remaining in Russia's degraded Black Sea fleet, equipped with Kaliber cruise missile launch capacity, and serving as a forward command relay node for coastal strike coordination along the Ukrainian shoreline. The officer on watch believed the harbor perimeter was clean. What nobody aboard that vessel understood was that Ukraine had already been mapping that exact berth for 72 hours, and the first wave of the strike package had already crossed into the Black Sea before a single alarm had time to sound. What you're about to understand is not simply a drone attack. It is the most precisely engineered unmanned assault sequence documented in this war to date. And by the time this breakdown is finished, you will see exactly why, as of June 2026, Russia has no remaining answer to what Ukraine has built. The strike package that departed Ukrainian-controlled territory in the final hours before dawn was never designed as a single weapon. It was a synchronized, multi-domain assault architecture constructed specifically to exhaust, confuse, and then destroy in a carefully timed sequence that Russia's defense systems were never simultaneously capable of handling. 6 UJ-22 Bober fixed-wing strike drones launched from dispersed land positions, flying in staggered formation at 180 feet above the sea surface, throttled to 115 miles per hour, low enough that their radar cross-section collapsed into the background noise of wave scatter on Russia's coastal detection grid. Simultaneously, 4 Magura V-5 unmanned surface vessels departed from a separate vector, cutting through the pre-dawn chop along the coastline's eastern seam. 2 of those boats carried 320-kilogram shaped warheads positioned for hull penetration strikes at the waterline. The remaining 2 were purpose-built decoys, each one broadcasting transponder signals calibrated to mimic commercial maritime traffic. And above the entire package, invisible at 23,000 feet, a reconnaissance drone maintained a persistent orbital track over the harbor, feeding corrected targeting coordinates through an encrypted relay back to the Ukrainian operations cell, running the strike from a hardened control facility near Odessa. Every platform in that package had a precisely assigned function. Every function had been engineered to force Russia's layered defense network into a resource allocation problem it could not mathematically solve. The first contact alarm reached the Novorossiysk Harbor Defense Command at 03:31. Russia's coastal surveillance radar resolved 4 surface signatures, closing from the southeast at combat speed, approximately 55 miles out. After a sequence of Ukrainian drone boat strikes earlier in the conflict had repeatedly penetrated the same harbor perimeter, Russian crews at Novorossiysk had been operating on a heightened readiness posture for weeks. The Pantsir S-1 air defense battery reacted within seconds of the contact alert. Surveillance radar transferred track data to the fire control channel. Lock was achieved, and 57 E-6 interceptor missiles launched against the surface formation. 2 Magura decoys detonated in sharp orange blooms above the water. Salt columns rose through the darkness. The defense crew logged the intercepts as confirmed kills, and it began cycling the system back to standby. What those operators had not done was sweep the northwestern approach corridor. Ukraine had anticipated exactly that gap. Before the 2 decoy surface vessels were destroyed, each one had already released a cluster of compact FPV drones carrying dedicated electronic warfare payloads. These were not strike assets. They had no warheads. Their singular purpose was cognitive and electronic saturation, flooding the Panzer battery's engagement display with overlapping false contact returns and injecting broadband jamming energy into the fire control radar's frequency band, forcing the crew to manually triage which signals represented genuine threats and which were manufactured noise. The Panzer expended 3 additional missiles engaging the FPV formation before transitioning to its twin 2 A-38M autocannons, cycling at 5,000 rounds per minute to clear the remaining contacts. Russia had now consumed a substantial fraction of its ready intercept magazine against foam decoys, electronic payloads, and fiberglass hulls. The 6 Bober strike drones had not yet drawn a single defensive shot. At 03:37, the Krasuka 4 ground-based electronic warfare complex came online. This was Russia's operational answer to Ukraine's drone offensive, a mobile jamming platform designed to project a dense electromagnetic suppression envelope across a radius of several dozen miles, severing GPS navigation feeds, corrupting data link connections, and cutting the operational tether between Ukrainian remote pilots and their weapons entirely. Inside the Ukrainian control facility, the impact registered immediately. Telemetry feeds fragmented. Positional data corrupted. Video downlinks collapsed into interference patterns. 1 Bober drone dropped dangerously low, its altitude hold function degraded by the GPS denial. Warning indicators cascaded across every operator station. Signal lost. Signal lost. For a measurable interval, Russia had successfully blinded the entire inbound package. What the Krasuka 4 system could not account for was that Ukraine had pre-engineered its drone guidance architecture specifically around this contingency. The Bober drones carried dual-mode navigation, combining inertial measurement units with onboard terrain referenced guidance algorithms. Full mission routing had been loaded into local memory before wheels up. Gyroscopic heading maintenance required no external signal input whatsoever. The instant the GPS denial environment activated, the drones autonomously transitioned to inertial flight mode and continued on course without interruption. The operators in Odessa were now passengers. The weapons were flying themselves, guided by preloaded maps, gyroscope heading data, and autonomous logic that had computed the approach corridor before the mission ever launched. The most sophisticated jamming platform in Russia's coastal defense inventory had just confirmed the precise boundary of its own operational limitation. It could sever the human link. It could not reach the machine. Russia activated a second electronic warfare asset, a shorter-range suppression system positioned specifically to protect the harbor's inner anchorage zone, designed to degrade drone navigation coherence in the immediate approach corridor. The effect was partial but real. 2 of the remaining Bober drones lost directional stability, diverged from the attack axis, and fell outside the strike corridor entirely. The formation had been reduced to 4 drones and 1 surviving Magura V5. Russia simultaneously committed 6 Lancet 3 loitering munitions from coastal launch positions, tasking them with intercepting the surface vessel and attritioning the remaining drone formation before it reached the inner harbor. The first Lancet acquired the surviving Magura through its electro-optical seeker on a passive heat differential, engine exhaust against cold seawater. The intercept was clean. The 320-kilogram warhead Ukraine had positioned for a hull strike detonated prematurely in a column of fire and displaced water. But the Lancet had exposed its own flight profile in the process. The reconnaissance drone overhead was already tracking it. 2 Bober drones broke from the strike corridor and flew an immediate intercept course against the Lancet formation. At 115 miles per hour against a Lancet's 55 mile per hour cruise speed, the geometry was not competitive. 2 Lancets were destroyed before their seekers could acquire the closing drones. Russia had now expended 3 of 6 committed loitering munitions. 1 against a decoy boat, 2 lost a drone counter-intercept. The remaining 3 pulled back to reassess targeting priority. The drones were still closing. At Aero 349, 2 Bober drones penetrated the final defensive ring and entered the direct protection zone over the inner harbor. The vessel's point defense system fired 2 9M31 surface-to-air missiles from its remaining ready launcher. 1 intercepted a Bober cleanly. The other lost track and terminal guidance and missed wide. 1 drone remained airborne. The ship's close-in weapon system, a 30mm rotary cannon platform cycling at elevated fire rate, opened up across the bow sector, pouring sustained fire into the approach corridor. It destroyed the final drone at close range. But the Magura V5 that had survived by throttling down to near idle speed and hugging wave troughs to suppress its heat signature had never been re-engaged. It was still on course, still closing, still invisible to every sensor that Russia had already redirected toward the drone formation. Here is where the geometry of the situation became irreversible. The vessel at the berth was not a fixed shore installation. It was a large steel hull rolling on pre-dawn swells, its deck oscillating through a continuous arc, its fire control sensors already task-saturated from the previous 26 minutes of engagement. Tracking a low-profile surface vessel operating below wave height against background sea clutter from a pitching deck is a categorically harder problem than the same intercept executed from a stable land platform. The close-in weapon system's fire control processor was reacquiring from scratch every time the deck rolled. The Magura was now inside the minimum effective engagement range for any of Russia's remaining intercept systems. The reconnaissance drone overhead transmitted the final corrected aim coordinates. The Magura's guidance locked the target bearing. The approach vector aligned with the hull's engine compartment section at the waterline. Russia had no remaining intercept capacity that could reach it in time. What Russia lost in those early morning hours extended considerably beyond 1 damaged vessel and 1 degraded berth. The Sergei Kotov had been one of the few operationally ready, Kaliber-capable platforms remaining in Russia's Black Sea force structure. With it removed from active deployment, the fleet's aggregate long-range maritime strike capacity against Ukrainian infrastructure targets contracted in a measurable and non-trivial way. More fundamentally, the strike validated something that Russia's naval command has been unable to strategically resolve since mid-2022. After the loss of the Moskva in open water, Russia repositioned its surviving fleet assets into harbor anchorages, operating under the institutional assumption that coastal proximity to layered air defense networks provided a level of protection that open water operations could not. Novorossiysk was the empirical test of that assumption. The assumption was wrong. As of June 2026, Russia's entire Black Sea fleet operates under a standing operational reality that Ukraine can reach any berth at any hour with attack systems that individually cost less than the interceptor missiles. expended trying to stop them. 6 drones, 2 surface vessels, a persistent reconnaissance platform overhead, and an attack architecture built across so many sequential layers that Russia consumed missiles, autocannon rounds, electronic warfare activations, and loitering munitions, neutralizing decoys and noise generators, while the systems carrying actual warheads continued closing without interruption. That is the operational signature of what struck Novorossiysk in the hours before dawn, and Russia's naval command is still unable to produce a defense doctrine that accounts for it. The question that nobody inside that command structure can currently answer is not whether Ukraine will run this sequence again. It is where they have already positioned the next package, and whether the target they have selected this time is a vessel Russia can afford to lose.